I've been a SpongeBob fan for a very long time. Some of my favorite memories from the show are when Plankton and Mr. Krabs will go at it, feuding over the secret formula. Recently, I discovered an analog horror comic made by Marcus Yu that explores the idea of the secret formula in a very interesting way. I'd like to bring you guys all on this journey with me and cover this video series. The series starts off with the classic episode where Plankton actually does get his hands on the secret formula. After looking at it though, you can see the expression on his face is not joy. When he throws the paper down, tears in his eyes, he realizes that the formula actually includes plankton. He is part of the recipe for the Krabby Patty. This is a popular episode on the SpongeBob series, but where this creator decides to take things gets even creepier, as if the art wasn't already creepy enough the way that it is. I wanted to let that one play without narration. I think that the way that the artist uses screams in the background of the creepy music really adds a lot of ambience to what's going on in this scene. Speaking of which, let's go over this scene step by step. In this scene, we can see Plankton running for his life away from Mr. Krabs that has just caught him stealing the secret formula. He runs across Bikini Bottom and all the way back to SpongeBob's pineapple, yelling SpongeBob's name as if he needs his help. The door creaks open, but Plankton is confused as he does not see SpongeBob standing there answering the door. So he enters the house, still confused about where SpongeBob is, only to find a liquid on the floor. Tears in his eyes, the viewers aren't shown what happened yet, but it is clear that Plankton is very upset about this situation. Then it shows the screen, and Gary has been smashed. His shell is cracked, laying on the floor with a pile of blood in front of him. To me, some of the most unsettling content can be when you can take such an innocent children's show and make such a creepy horror based on it. And as you'll see as we progress through this, it only gets darker and darker, and that's where I think this artist really excels. Along with the sound design, it really is a beautiful piece of work. Let's move into part 3 and see what happens. This scene opens in a remote shelter. Plankton confides in Karen, explaining that he's fearing that Krabs already got SpongeBob. But some good news arises as Karen tells Plankton she has access to all of Bikini Bottom's CCTV footage security, so they might be able to find SpongeBob in that. Plankton is confused on how she thinks they're going to find him. She points out that one of the cameras had been shut off, and she believes that this is where Mr. Krabs would abduct somebody. Plankton does not seem confident in the idea. She then gives Plankton a bracelet where he can communicate with her no matter where he is at. This way they can keep in touch while he is out doing tasks. Karen informs Plankton that in order to restore power to Bikini Bottom, he needs to go to Rock Bottom alone. Something that I find very interesting about this piece of artwork is that they pit Mr. Krabs as the evil one. In the show, Plankton is often made out to be the bad guy. However, every time I watch the show, it does seem like Mr. Krabs would actually be the best villain, since he is so obsessed with money and his company that he will do anything to anybody just to get his way and get more money. I guess that this piece of artwork is kind of more accurately depicting what Mr. Krabs would be in a horror element. In the next part, we see Plankton go to rock bottom. There, the people are actually extremely scary. The entire situation is dark and creepy, but what he finds in rock bottom will truly terrify us. When Plankton first sets foot in rock bottom, we can see how terrifying it looks just by the dark ambience. But then, as we see the citizens that are down there, they are definitely creepy. We can see the fear on Plankton's face as he is definitely uncomfortable in this situation. But it is not long before Plankton finds exactly what he is looking for, in which he informs Karen he has found. She then tells him to put her inside of the breaker so that she can take care of what she needs to. It is here that they are able to restore the power, but will that actually be good for them is the question. But unfortunately, once they show what's on the tablet screen, we can see it's SpongeBob hanging from chains in a dungeon. It is at this point in the story that the viewer first gets to see SpongeBob, and this is probably the worst way that we could see him, locked and chained in some type of dungeon. It is up to Plankton to save him here, and our story continues in part 5. Let's review. In this moment, Plankton enters the dungeon to see if he can find SpongeBob, and what he sees is SpongeBob hanging from the chains. Plankton is determined to get him out of here, but SpongeBob is stressing to him, please do not. He says, please do not turn on the lights. Please do not turn on the lights. As the camera shows us a close-up of Plankton's face, you can tell he is disturbed. Then it shows us SpongeBob. He's been completely wrung out of moisture. He's no longer the square sponge that we've come to love. Plankton is extremely disturbed by this, and SpongeBob tells him it hurts so much. He explains that Mr. Krabs has been harvesting his sponge and will not stop doing it. It is here where we get an emotional scene between SpongeBob and Plankton, and after this, I want to leave it with no narration, as I believe the artwork should be appreciated. This emotional twist left me shocked, and it left me sitting on the edge of my seat ready to see what's going to happen next. Speaking of which, let's check out part number 6. We open on Plankton being left with the decision to pull the kill switch on SpongeBob. In the following scene, SpongeBob is basically begging Plankton to pull the switch and let it all end. Plankton, however, is distraught and doesn't know what he can do. He ultimately decides that he cannot do this task. SpongeBob continues to plead with Plankton, asking him to please just end his suffering. Plankton would finally give in to SpongeBob's pleads and would hit the kill switch. This would send electricity throughout SpongeBob's body, essentially killing him on the spot. Plankton sobs at what he just did, and as we get another close-up of him, we get to see what he did. It shows us a frightening SpongeBob that's been fried to death. Skull and bones is all that's left. Something horrible would happen though as soon as he does this. The door would slam shut and be locked. Plankton could no longer get out of this room. Now in this room lies just him and SpongeBob's corpse. As we exit that scene, we can hear a speaker going off above Plankton, and it would appear that it is Mr. Krabs, as the dialogue does say "Arg." This would mean that Plankton has now successfully killed SpongeBob, and Mr. Krabs has caught Plankton in the same exact dungeon that he had SpongeBob held captive. Let's go into part 7. We open up the scene on Mr. Krabs and Plankton having a dialogue. Mr. Krabs is talking to him about how many years he's been trying to steal the formula. Plankton expresses how vile Mr. Krabs is and how he saw that the ingredients in the formula was plankton. But Mr. Krabs says, was it worth the price, the cost that it costed to get that formula? It is here where Mr. Krabs will blame Plankton for the murder of SpongeBob, even though it was clearly Mr. Krabs that held him captive. But he does use the defense that he did not pull the kill switch. This leaves Plankton distraught. It is shown to us here in plain sight that the only thing Mr. Krabs cares about is making money from the Krusty Krab. I do like that the artist decided to stick with the theme that Mr. Krabs is just obsessed with money. I believe this was the right direction to head, and it also makes it really easy to flip Plankton to be the good guy in the viewer's eyes. Let's move on to part 8 and see what happens. In this scene, we see Karen bust through the metal door looking for Plankton inside. As she navigates her way through the darkness, she sees Plankton. She picks him up off the ground in a very emotional state. There's a moment of sadness before she notices SpongeBob hanging dead from the wall. She expresses to Plankton her grief for it taking so long for her to arrive there, and then wants to know what happened. Here's where we get to see that Plankton is able to speak to her. She states that she will get him out and bring them to safety. Chillingly, we see Plankton explain that the toxins leaked out of SpongeBob's decomposing corpse, and now he can no longer move his limbs as they are infected. It is here we get to see an emotional moment between Karen and Plankton, as we are not exactly sure if Plankton will survive. This is the creator's Patreon. If you guys want to check it out, you guys can go do that and support him. So at this point, we are unaware if Plankton has survived or not, but I think that if I had to guess, I would say that he is dead. Let's take a look at part 9 and see what we can find out. As the scene starts, we see Karen rush into the remote shelter, carrying Plankton in her arms. Acting quick to do something to save him, I would believe. She has a plan, and she starts to begin that plan, throwing him onto an operating table. She is determined to save Plankton, and she will do all she can, as it is pretty clear. She puts him in the machine and then pushes a couple of buttons. The machine starts to buzz, and she begs for it to work. I believe the story is setting us up to be upset, as we can tell by the next title in part 9. The title of part 9 is labeled as Vengeance. To me, that tells me that up to this point, everything has been happening that is bad to Plankton and SpongeBob, and in the next episode, I believe they will try to get their vengeance in some way. Let's check it out. As the scene begins, we can see that Plankton is alive. He's waking up on the operating table, confused about where he is. Karen lets him know that they are safe in the bunker away from Mr. Krabs. It is at this moment that Plankton says that he doesn't remember exactly what happened. We can see that Plankton has robotic arms now. Karen explains that Plankton saved her life by building her, and so she wanted to save his life and build him. Now they are both machines. It is here where Plankton wants to know where Krabs is, and Karen would let him know. Plankton is convinced that he is going to end this thing, and he shall go fight Mr. Krabs. Karen is trying to argue with him to tell him not to go, but he is determined to get his vengeance. Having just woken up from near death, Plankton is determined to get his vengeance on Mr. Krabs. He is determined to make him pay for SpongeBob and his sake. As we start to approach the end of this series, it is clear that it is going to wrap up in an interesting way. Just from the last scene, looking at Plankton's face, you can see that there is a lot of anger and pain in his eyes. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in part 11. Let's take a look. We open up this scene with Plankton explaining that he's done playing by the rules as he's always played fair, and now it's time for him to make the rules. Karen is of course worried about his well-being, but Plankton has a new sense of dedication to vengeance against Mr. Krabs. So with that being said, he heads out on his journey to end this once and for all. He shows that he is clearly stricken with PTSD over what has happened and what happened with SpongeBob, and spending all that time in the bunker sealed with him. We cut to an image of Mr. Krabs, and it explains that this will be the last time that he walks through a door. Plankton explains that this will be the last time that he counts his damn change, and he will never live to see another day. The end of part 11 makes it pretty clear to me that there will be a big battle between Plankton and Mr. Krabs. However, I am not exactly sure how this will play out, as Mr. Krabs is a lot bigger than Plankton. Plankton did look at that big metal suit, but Mr. Krabs in this specific horror is pretty crazy looking. Let's go to the finale of this horror AU and see what happens. From here we can tell that the battle will take place inside of the Krusty Krab. It shows Mr. Krabs looking rather normal in this scene, just talking about how it's a beautiful day. That is until we see the metal robotic arm, probably of Plankton's robot, coming through the door and grabbing Mr. Krabs by the neck. Throwing him against the desk, he begins to fight, gripping Mr. Krabs by the arms and tearing them straight off. Mr. Krabs screams loud and then gets thrown out into the middle of the floor. When we cut back to Mr. Krabs' face, it becomes that distorted face that we saw in the beginning, the crazy, creepy crab. Plankton explains how SpongeBob suffered, and it is now Mr. Krabs who will pay. Mr. Krabs does say that it is already over, Plankton, as SpongeBob is already dead, so there's nothing else that can be done. Plankton, standing over Mr. Krabs' body, says nothing will ever replace the greed behind him. Krabs says to Plankton that he will never ever dream of to success like he has. This again points out how that's all Mr. Krabs cares about. He then reiterates that Plankton is a nobody and has never been anything. Plankton ultimately agrees that he is a nobody, but SpongeBob was a somebody. This is when he will take his last stand. There's horror on Mr. Krabs' face as Plankton prepares for his final blow. A knife retracts from his wrist, and he cuts Mr. Krabs straight down the middle. It is at this point that we can see the wound. Straight in half, Mr. Krabs' body falls. Plankton standing over defeated Mr. Krabs. Blood all over the floor. That's where our story would end. If there was a way to write SpongeBob as a horror, this is probably the way that I would do it. I love the way that this artist used Mr. Krabs' greed as a way to portray him as the enemy. His greed got in the way and allowed him to do terrible things to both SpongeBob and Plankton. I think that I really would like to see this as a full animation. A little bit of color and some animation and voice acting, this could really be a super cool animated horror universe for SpongeBob. I really enjoyed making this video. If you enjoyed watching this video, please leave a like and a subscribe, as this really helps the channel a lot. You guys can go ahead and click on another video here on the screen if you want to watch some other disturbing content. If you guys are interested in supporting me, you can buy some merch down below, or you can just leave a thanks or a super chat. Alright, I'll see you later.